I know my shirt says dilly dilly, but I was just really hoping that we could all collectively use our imaginations and pretend that it says Billy Billy, because I do not own any Saw merch. I know my devoted subjects are probably a little bit surprised about that because I do have a lot of horror fashion in my wardrobe. And if you're new here, don't be alarmed. My subscribers are much more than that to me. They are my devoted subjects. They are my little maggots. They are my little demons. And I, the Antichrist, I, the spawn of Satan, I, the unholy ruler, and the Duchess of Darkness, I take all these titles and you take all of those in this relationship. Because the kind and generous person that I am willing to take your soul away from you because I know that it's just such a burden. I will keep it safe and this community will help keep it safe. All you have to do to join our little coven is click subscribe. And then it also helps to click the like button and the notification bell. That way you never miss our next meeting. In today's gathering, today's order of business is re-ranking the entire Saw franchise. I haven't done this in about 2 years since Spiral came out in 2021. Since then, I've now rewatched the entire franchise and I've also gone out and seen Saw X, and a lot of my opinions have changed, but some of them have stayed quite the same. That would include the lowest movie on my list. That would be Spiral. I would like to like this movie for several reasons because number one, I think it had the opportunity to be the best marriage of the cop storyline and the Jigsaw trap storyline of the entire franchise. Of course, that'd be a really tough bar to meet with Saw 2 in the mix, but it had that opportunity because it gets more deeply into cop corruption. The entire plot of Spiral paints this really interesting picture that I think exemplifies just a microcosm of the entire system at large. So I am really rooting for this movie, but what sucks about it and why it's last on the list is because it just does such a terrible job in its execution. I also know that tonally they wanted to go for something else, and for this kind of subject matter, a different tone would have been interesting, especially as it's a copycat and it's not a part of the traditional story, but it just didn't work for me. The sort of divergence they took with all the comedy, and I know that Chris Rock wrote most of that. One Letterboxd review that I saw was really funny, and it was like, Chris Rock attempts new stand-up material in this movie. And that's kind of exactly what it feels like. There's a bunch of really weird tangents and dialogue that is oddly misogynistic. The classic male humor of, you know, hating your wife or something. You can give her 600 Tuesdays, but that'll never matter more to her than those 3 Saturdays. Oh, why are you calling them bitches? Well, I don't call them bitches to their face. What do you... Am I supposed to laugh? Did anybody laugh? There were jokes that were just so irrelevant. I think that Chris Rock thought that he could kind of tie that into the character development because in those scenes he is speaking to someone who is married. And you know what? I did the quotes because I thought I could stay away from spoilers, but with Saw, I don't think that's possible. So you know what? This video is going to contain a lot of spoilers. Rather than letting that character build out that lie and hearing from him, instead we get Chris Rock practicing stand-up. And I just get so bored because I don't find it funny. It's not engaging at all. It's also very much edited like the early 2000s Saw movies, but not in the same charming, gritty kind of way. It just comes off really cheesy. I basically maintain all of the same complaints that I had the first time around, except this time I realized that the traps are not as bad as I thought they were. They're still, I think, the worst of the franchise though. Maybe a little bit better than the ones in Jigsaw, maybe a little bit, but they're also just not as engaging to me because the people in them I'm not rooting for at all. And in a lot of the Saw traps throughout the franchise, you kind of are, and you actually do feel a bit stressed out. That's what I think Saw X did really well, because these were bad people that he had captured, but also they were people that were in a desperate situation. So you were still feeling stressed and like rooting for them and, you know, hoping they would get out and learn from it. But in Spiral, I don't care. I don't care about anybody in the traps. Pretty much just because I don't care about any of the characters in the entire movie. I did, however, round my score up from 1.5 stars to 2 stars because now that I watched it knowing the twist, I guess I somehow was able to forgive it a little bit more, pay a little bit more attention to the story, because the first time I saw the movie in theaters, I was just so distracted by how painfully obvious the twist was. That was just pissing me off the whole time, and so when I was in theaters, I was just waiting for that to be revealed. Like the whole rest of the movie, I was just like, okay, come on, like let's just get through this. This is so boring. So this time, yeah, I had a little bit more appreciation for the story, a little bit more appreciation for the traps, but it's still by far the worst Saw movie. Coming in at number 9, we have Jigsaw. So actually, my last 2 places did not change. Although this time around, I actually liked Jigsaw. Saw. I didn't really see that much that was wrong with it. Obviously, it's not as good as some other Saw movies by a mile. And the twist reveal, while I think that it was effective, it actually did shock me the first time around, and I enjoyed this on the rewatch, kind of looking for all the little clues. While I like the twist in that regard, I also just hate it. Because what do you mean there was a third Jigsaw accomplice? Like, you cannot do this. You can't do this to me, not in the 8th movie of the franchise. You just could never convince me that he came before Amanda and Hoffman. Like, no. While I did actually kind of like Logan as a character, he did feel a little bit Hoffman rinse and repeat vibes. Though, hands up, I liked his acting. I really like Logan as a character. I do think that it's a shame that he was thrown into the 8th movie, and it really kind of does a disservice to the rest of the timeline. But at that point of the franchise, I guess I was just kind of fine with it. I just resigned myself to it this time around. I think that's what I said in my Letterboxd review too. I was like, you know what? Convoluted twists are exactly what I expect at this point of the franchise. And I really like the traps in it, except that there's a lot of CGI, which in doing my research and stuff, it sounds like most of it was practical, but you can tell there's a lot of VFX in there as well. So that's another thing that kind of takes it down a notch for me. Moving on to my number 8, oddly, I really did not like Saw 4 very much this time around, but I do put it above Jigsaw and Spiral because it is part of the original story, and we also have Strom and Hoffman. This is also, I believe, where Jill Tuck gets to become kind of more of a main player in the games. So I love that aspect and kind of the B plot of the storyline that's going on. I do not like the A plot. I don't like really the choice of the lead in this movie. He was such a random character that was plucked from the previous movies that was so inconsequential. I remember when I was showing my dad the movies for the first time, he was like, who is this guy? And I was like, he's from the movies before, but like we didn't really know him. He wasn't really a character. And also, I found this thematically the most weak movie of the franchise, probably. Like, thematically, Spiral is a much stronger movie than this one, because the reason that he was chosen for his trap, I get that it's a bit more complex, I'm gonna boil it down a bit, is basically just that he needed to learn to not save everyone. Like, what kind of, he's a cop, and that's supposed to be his job. I know that that is not at all the actual function of police in this country, but that also just didn't seem to manage to unpack the fact that he was a black police officer, for one thing, so his function in the system would be a lot more complicated. I feel like it would make a lot more sense that somebody like him would be trying to save everybody. Like, it's just such a weird theme for Saw 4. Was not really that into it this time around. In fact, I was so surprised that the movie that I used to rank 3rd from the bottom has now moved up, though technically still at number 7, but it did move up a notch, would be Saw 3D. I actually kind of loved this movie this time around. Not that this group of people that were punished was the best choice ever, but I think a really fun choice nonetheless, having a guy that wrote a book pretending to have gone through a Saw situation and then actually being put into one. I did kind of like that. We do get the least amount of John Kramer, otherwise maybe this could be a little bit higher on the list, but in consolation for that guy being kind of the main character going through all the traps and stuff, the people in the very beginning in the opening trap were a bunch of raging racists. So I was actually fine with that. That I think I'll kind of round it out. And also the return of Carrie Elwes. Like, come on. The return of Dr. Gordon as the final twist surprise accomplice. Like, what? It's ridiculous. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, no. Now I'm like, whatever. Yeah, right on. Because giving it more thought, I contemplated. I thought, you know what? If I was him and I cut off my own foot and had survived this, and some other poser is acquiring so much wealth, so much fame, claiming to have done this, I would have been pissed too. I probably wouldn't have subjected him to the same fate, but I was able to not understand his actions, but understand his motivations. And I was like, whatever, this is far-fetched, but I'm on board. So a lot more love for Saw 3D this time around. There are a couple other things obviously that hold it back. I mean, the blood doesn't look as good in this one. It's weirdly bright for some reason. The opening trap has this super annoying early 2000s gimmick of featuring a girl in a little shirt with big boobs, when no other Saw movie before that one had ever become victim to that. I would honestly say that up till then, the only thing that was meant to be super titillating and wild was all the gore of the Saw movies. They never had to kind of stoop to that low-hanging fruit, so that's another annoying thing about it, but I do like Saw 7, or Saw 3D, whatever. At number 6, I'm so surprised that this one fell off for me a little bit. That would be Saw 3. The best thing about Saw 3, I think, is the whole thematic through line of forgiveness and revenge, because that is probably one of the most morally complex situations that any of the victims have had to go through. I guess the whole twist reveal of those two people being husband and wife, it lost a little bit of bite the second time around, because the second time around too, it felt so obvious for some reason. I was like, how did I not guess this the last time? And also, Saw 3 is just a movie that I have a hard time forgiving. I think now upon a rewatch after seeing the rest of the franchise, I hold a little bit more animosity towards it for killing off not only John Kramer, which I don't think was really a mistake, but for killing off Amanda too, because that's what I said in my Letterboxd review. She easily could have carried the franchise for such a long time. I mean, she still is, let's be honest. Such a bizarre choice, such a strange choice. It's hard because I do still like her whole twist reveal about her fundamentally misunderstanding the purpose of the traps. Does it really make sense given all that she went through? No, not really, because why would she be so sadistic? I don't know. Maybe we need another filler movie between Saw X and Saw 2, or between Saw 2 and Saw 3, because then that way we could see her character development and how she got to that point. Thematically, a lot going on, a lot that is very, very strong about Saw 3. I don't know if maybe I'm just really bitter about their deaths, and that is my main gripe. Still a great entry of the franchise, don't get me wrong. I mean, starting with number 9 on my list, I pretty much love all the Saw movies, so don't get me wrong there. I guess I had more complaints this time around. And weirdly, this is the weirdest choice on my list, and how this ended up happening, I don't know. But coming in at number 5 would be Saw 5. I didn't even like this movie really the first time around. I mean, maybe I did because I remember I really enjoyed the twists of it, but this time around, I loved it. I don't know if it was because I was really sick with a cold and I was a bit feverish. That's something that maybe we should consider here. I don't know. But I loved the whole cat and mouse situation between Strom and Hoffman. I think that their relationship is actually one of my favorites of the Saw franchise. And this movie had such good traps. The actual individual traps themselves might not have been the strongest with that group of 5 people, but I love the lesson that they learn, and it's equally as frustrating on a rewatch because now knowing the case that they needed to work together, it becomes even more stressful and infuriating on the rewatch, so it kind of maintains my emotional investment, where that's not always the case with some movies. Sometimes when shock value wears off, that's sort of all the movie had going for it the first time around, but not the case with Saw 5. And also it has the box water trap. I mean, that one is amazing. It's also a good group of people that they chose to throw into this trap. I mean, did they deserve that? That's a thing that I don't want to get into because we're watching movies. We're watching Saw movies. I don't want to split hairs on that. But they're people that you don't easily empathize with, and I think that's where the interest comes into play as an audience member. It's these morality debates that we get to have. So I guess that I really love Saw 5, but maybe that will change again upon my third watch of the movie. Who knows? I just know that Strom and Hoffman are also very, very good looking men. So I enjoy their sexy little game together. I think they should have kissed at the end. Anyways, moving on, at number 4, we have the original Saw. I get that it was such a groundbreaking movie. I love it to death. Okay, it's a 4-star movie for me. One of the craziest twists in all of cinema history. Such an important film for starting this franchise, etc., etc. But in my own personal opinion, I feel like the franchise really found its stride in the second film. I think that Saw became what it really truly was meant to be in the subsequent movies. The first movie, obviously, it laid the groundwork, but it is much more of kind of a drama thriller. And the original game, while I love that it's much more character driven, it's not quite as grand and complex as, you know, that's something that I grew to really love and appreciate about the following movies. Especially because I do become a John Kramer sympathizer, and the original movie is probably the one where he is the most outright villain. Hi, I'm editing right now, and I feel like I didn't really make the point here that I was meaning to, but basically I feel like the best Saw movies can combine that morality element and their really rich, complex themes with super crazy over-the-top traps. So you'll see that with my top 3 of the franchise. Don't get me wrong, love Saw. I'm just trying to come up with a couple of reasons as to why it's not higher up on the list. Coming in at number 3, speaking of sequels, we have Saw 2. Saw 2 is nearly a perfect film to me. This is what I'm talking about when I say it took another try for the franchise to really hit its stride. This movie has so many different moving parts going on, and also I realized that my favorite Saw movies have groups of people that are working through the traps. Saw 5, for example, I realized that I really appreciated that. That also might have been why I enjoyed Jigsaw more on the second viewing. I don't know. But Saw 2, I love Donnie Wahlberg in the role. He's a character that you just kind of love to hate. He does such a good job. This is where they kind of started planting the thematic seeds of the corrupt cop thing in this franchise. Because not only do you come to find out that this man is not just a bad father, but he is also wrongfully locked up all these people at one point or another, and his son is trapped in the giant saw trap with all of them, and it's only a matter of time before they figure that out. That's crazy. All of that contributes to this mounting sense of absolute dread. It is so thrilling. I love Saw 2. The traps are pretty good. Of course, there's the iconic needle pit scene, but I think that probably my favorite moment of the movie is at the very ending. Donnie Wahlberg's character was explicitly told, if you sit down and talk to me for an hour, your son will be delivered in a safe and secure location. That blew me away the first time, and still on the rewatch, I was like, wow. It's interesting because my first watch through of the franchise, I don't remember where I ranked Saw 2. I want to say that it was in my top 3, but I can't be completely certain of that. I guess I'll have to react to that initial ranking at some point. Maybe I'll do that for my patrons. I also really love the direction of it. There's some really cool in-camera effect kind of moments, like the moment where he's in his dingy little apartment and then the wall literally moves and then he is walking onto the scene of the crime. It's just a lot of little moments like that are kind of piggybacking off of the weird, interesting transitions that James Wan is known for, but then in some cases elevating them and having more fun with them. Just a lot of really, really good filmmaking in Saw 2. I love it. Coming in at number 2, we have Saw X. Saw X and Saw 2 are both movies that I think are nearly perfect. Saw X is another one that I give 4.5 stars. I'm obsessed with it. I said in my review, I think that it is the best horror movie of the year so far. The only reason why I could dock it a point is because of the dumb-ass Breaking Bad filter when they're in Mexico. So embarrassing. I cannot believe they did that. Kevin, my guy. I think that I'm just gonna save myself the whole ramble here because I did just post like a 27-minute review of that entire movie. I got into mostly all spoiler-free thoughts, but also a little spoiler-filled ramble at the very end. So I've exhausted myself a little bit there. Let me try to think of any reason why I put it above most of the rest of the franchise. I guess I would have to say it's because I am a John and Amanda sympathizer. I love them so much. They are my absolute favorite relationship of the franchise. I said that Strom and Hoffman are one of my favorites, but John and Amanda, obviously they're my favorite. It was one of my favorite groups of people that have been caught in the traps because, like I said, a lot of them you do sympathize with because they're people in tough situations. And I had someone in my mentions that I had to block because they were so annoying. They just had really black and white thinking about how they were just pissed that the movie was trying to make us sympathize with John and Amanda because they are just the villains and they should not be framed in any other type of way, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, first of all, even if this wasn't a movie, like, calm down. Humans are much more complex than that. Even the worst person you know has, like, even 1% of goodness in them. Morality is such a vast spectrum that it's never that simple, first of all. Second of all, another reason why they were claiming this is because he put people in the traps like a prostitute, a drug addict, you know, and how he's a villain for choosing those types of people. And I have to stress, because they remind us of this in literally every single movie, John is testing people. He wants them to survive. In Saw X, I think Amanda literally says that explicitly, that he wants you to survive. He wants you to get through this. And And even though they're people in really tough situations, I think the movie is making a commentary on that, especially with the girl that almost makes it. She makes it through her trap only to be killed by the person that was monetarily abusing her. I think that's indicative of like the working class struggle right now. I thought that was a really interesting little glimpse at a microcosm of it. So, you know, for another thing that was completely intentional. I think that specific choice was meant to exacerbate the difference between John Kramer and this evil, evil woman that he had put in that trap. So yeah, needless to say, I didn't spend any time arguing with that person because, hello, caveman brain. But that very thing that they were complaining about, that so much of that thematic subtext went right over their head, is why I loved Saw X. And also, one could argue that John was doing the humane thing there, because these people, regardless of their monetary situation, were helping Cecilia to swindle cancer patients out of everything, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars that could have gone to these cancer patients' families, their children. And I would argue that John putting them through these traps that last 3 minutes is a lot more humane than reporting them and throwing them in jail for the rest of their life. I just feel like they were so close to the point, but there was just no chance of the critical thinking to actually get there. And also, please, if you're one of those people on Twitter right now that's raging and thinking that the Saw movies can't be funny because they're about cancer, literally kick rocks. Bye. And speaking of thematic subtext, what movie do I have at number 1 but none other than Saw 6? Saw 6 is a perfect film to me. I give it 5 stars on Letterboxd, and yes, each franchise, each genre, you gotta meet them on kind of different terms. So what I consider to be perfect films, it's always for different reasons. But for me, I've said this a bajillion times, to me a perfect film is a movie where I personally would not change a single thing. It doesn't mean that I am putting myself on some sort of critical pedestal like, oh, I went to film school, I know what a perfect film is. It's literally just movies that do nothing wrong in my eyes. I'm like, I was perfectly entertained and made all the choices that I would have made. So my perfect scores are very, very personal to me. And Saw 6 is a perfect film. First of all, it's the best group of people to be trapped. The healthcare industry, this is a really, really personal thing because obviously I live in California, I'm in the United States. Healthcare in this country, or the lack thereof, has killed, murdered so many millions of people. It is absurd. I am so excited about like the growing labor movement of this country because I think that we are coming for healthcare next. And Saw 6, I think, was just so ahead of its time. I feel like at the time, people did not have that kind of class consciousness that a lot of us do today. So Saw 6 has gotten a lot of recognition, I think, for at least from my generation, you know, as we've discovered the franchise, to put the CEO and like his worst employees through the entire Saw situation. He is a character that essentially killed people in the name of profit, because that is the whole purpose of healthcare now. It's all this for-profit system, and making him look people in the eye while he made the choice to kill them. That is a bonkers concept. Thematically so deep. It will leave you thinking for days. I'll never stop thinking about that movie and all the various outcomes, all the various choices, and why he would make them, you know? There's also the iconic carousel trap, but the one that honestly sticks with me more is when he's choosing between 2 people. There's the woman who is a little bit older, she has children, she has a family, and then there is his young, able-bodied employee. And on the tape, he's like, this is someone that you would cover because he's able-bodied, because he has no other health issues. She has a husband and family. They would have a lot to lose if she died. No one would really be that lost without this other young, healthy man. Like, such interesting questions that they pose in this movie, and I think that one sticks with me more than the carousel one, oddly. That one I think is just a lot more of a sensory overload and is a lot more intense because people are screaming the whole time, they're begging for their lives, they're turning into snakes and like outing each other. So interesting what you'll do when you are faced with death. That is another really interesting thing that they explored. Each different trap in Saw 6 just brought up so many different moral issues. I found it equally as engaging the second time around. I lost no enjoyment having that shock value kind of stripped away. And then underneath that with the B plot, it turns into the little cat and mouse situation with Jill and Hoffman. I just love Saw 6 so much. Last time that I ranked the franchise, I know that I kind of had it at a tie with the original Saw. This time the choice was just so obvious. I was like, you are the one. That's gonna do it for my ranking though. There is my ranking of Saw from 1 to 10, and how nice is that? Just a nice little even number there. Of course, I want to know how you rank Saw down below, and maybe your thoughts on Saw X, or save that for a comment for my Saw X review, because obviously I get a lot more into things over there. If you are a big Saw fan, then I would recommend sticking around on this channel because I have a lot more exciting Saw content to come, including a massive deep dive that will be coming later this month. Also, you probably noticed these names scrolling on screen. If you would like even more bonus content, then join the Patreon. There's going to be a lot of bonus content over there in the coming months because there is so much stuff coming out right now. I post 4 to 6 bonus reviews over there every single month, along with all the copyrighted watch-alongs that we do. So if you don't catch us live when we're doing a watch-along of, say, a Rob Zombie movie, then it's probably going to disappear from YouTube and end up living on Patreon. So there's a lot of fun stuff to find over there. They keep the lights on at Haunted Hippie Studios. They ensure that all the rest of this content is free for everybody else. So we love the patrons. Mwah, mwah, mwah. But if that is not for you, then all the rest of my social media is down below. I especially recommend following me on Instagram at Haunted Hippie Horror. That is where I just keep you up to date with pretty much everything that I'm doing. Oftentimes I do post my to-do list for the day, so you know what content that I'm working on. You get to see little behind the scenes snippets of me editing, you know, so I don't always keep all the burps that I let out while I'm recording. So you get to see those on Instagram. You also are always up to date whenever there's going to be another live stream or when a deep dive is coming out. So come over there, come follow me on Instagram. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye!